on some sports psychology work. Give it up!
So basically, mental training is an area of sports psychology that focuses on helping athletes break certain mental barriers to be able to perform at their best. And mindfulness is a kind of mental training. It's a psychological process that involves focusing your attention on something specific. So like how you're currently feeling, or like envisioning yourself playing your sport before it actually happens. And this video is an interview with Phil Jackson talking about how he integrated mental training into his coaching.
Hey, look, I'm on TV.
I don't know why I love you, but I do.
Yes.
So we talked about mindfulness as being, as much as we pump iron and we run to build our strength up, we need to build our mental strength up. We need to build our mental strength so we can focus, get one-pointed attention, and so that we can be in concert with one another in times of need.
Mm-hmm.
When you come off the court, you had a bad call, things going wrong for you, you sit on the bench, you take a breath, and you reseat yourself, you reset yourself. And you do that through this mindfulness. You just come right back in and collect yourself. So we practiced mindfulness, is what you have to do.
So you would literally have the guys sit in stillness,
That's right.
meditating.
That's right. Taught them how to hold their hands,
Mm-hmm.
where the shoulders have to be, the whole process of being in upright situations so that you're not slouched and you're not going to fall asleep. And they bought into it.
Would you do this before every game? You would do this regularly? You would do this?
We introduced it, and we introduced it in training camp. And then day of games, we started using it, and it ultimately became a process where...
It's like centering yourself.
That's
Centering.
right, just getting back to being centered.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, a lot of sports teams have started integrating mental training into their sports practices in order to improve their athletes' mental states. And your mental state during a practice or game is largely determined by your focus, your relaxation, and especially your positive thinking. And the purpose of mental training is to improve those things by increasing your focus on your emotions, your self-awareness, and learning to accept and control what you're feeling in the moment before your big game actually happens. So that brings me to my paper topic, which is basically seeing how mental practices can help improve physical performance in a sport. And my paper title is Neurocognitive Enhancement Effects of Combined Mindfulness Neurofeedback Training in Sport. So for this study, there were 50 participants that were split into 3 different groups. So for the first group, there were 15 young adults that regularly trained in sports and physical activity. And all of these participants either practiced football, volleyball, basketball, or martial arts. And in order to fall under the active category, you had to have been practicing your sport for at least 12 hours a week and for at least 10 years. But none of these athletes have become professional athletes or made any money off of their sport. And this group underwent the Mindfulness Neurofeedback Training Program, which I'm going to get into in a minute. And in addition to the active group, there were 35 young adults that were split into 2 different groups. And one underwent the same mindfulness neurofeedback training program as the active group, and the other one underwent an alternative control program. So before they started the study, all of the participants were tested for a history of any psychiatric or neurological diseases, risen stress level, or really anything that could have changed their mental state. And to do this, the participants took 3 different tests: the perceived stress scale, which is basically measuring your stress level; the stage trait anxiety disorder, which measures 2 kinds of anxiety: stage anxiety, which is usually about an event, and trait anxiety, which is more of a personal characteristic; and the Beck Depression Inventory, which measures attitudes and symptoms of depression. And all these questions here are examples of questions that you would see on these tests, and all the results for these tests were documented prior to the beginning of the study. So, as I said before, there were 3 groups for this study: the active experimental, the inactive experimental, and the inactive control groups. So, for the experimental groups, their mental training consisted of breathing awareness sessions where the subject was asked to focus their attention on their breathing and whatever they were physically feeling. And And while doing this, they also wore a neurofeedback device. So basically, by using 5 dry electrodes, 3 on the forehead, including the reference sensor, and then 1 by each ear, they were able to collect EEG data, which was then transferred to a smartphone app. And basically, the app would play a sound based on the subject's current emotion. So if the person was really agitated, then the app would play like a wind or a rainstorm sound. And the control group also did breathing awareness practices, but the difference is that they did not wear a neurofeedback device, so they weren't adapting to any EEG data or getting any real-time feedback while completing the mental training practice. So everyone trained for 2 consecutive weeks, and they started doing it for 10 minutes a day and gradually increased to 20. And they made sure that all the participants did their breathing awareness practices at home, just to keep it as independent as possible from any other factors, and at the same time every day for consistency. And the athletes were also asked to complete the mental training sessions as far away as possible from any physical training sessions, again, to keep it as independent as possible from any other factors. So in addition to the mental training, the participants were also asked to complete the META battery. And META is a standardized reaction time test based on a bunch of subtasks to measure different aspects of attention and control skills. So for this there were 3 different things that they were asked to do. So first they were asked to respond to a simple stimulus by pressing a button. And then for the second one they were focused on selective attention. So they were asked to detect and then respond to this stimulus by pressing the button. And then for the third, it focused on inhibition skills, so they had to detect and discriminate 2 different stimuli and respond to only one of them by pressing a button as quickly as possible. And for this test, the participants' reaction times were recorded, as well as the number of missed responses showing lack of attention, the number of early responses showing lack of behavioral control, and the false alarms, which is basically when a response was given when it should have been retained, showing impulsivity and lack of inhibition. And in addition to the Stroop Light in the META battery, the participants also did a Stroop Light digitized task, which is basically when there is a word, but the color of the word is different than the word itself. So like here, how purple is written in blue, the subject would have to say blue, not purple. So this is just another test to further test their response selection skills and control mechanisms under time pressure. And for this test, there were 160 stimuli presented, and each for 300 milliseconds. And their performance was scored by response times, accuracy, and the number of omitted responses. And here, this is an EEG montage. So basically, all of the circles are where an electrode is placed on the subject's head. So, and all of the different letters are just a different area of the brain. So, like the F is for frontal, T is for temporal, P is for parietal, O is for occipital, and T is for central. And the Z's that you see in the middle, that's based on the midline of the skull, so those are reference sensors. So basically they're just detecting the level of 0 voltage. And then the even numbers are just on the right side of the brain, and the odd ones are on the left. So here we have the results of the studies. So for the first graph, the x-axis is just before and after the study, and then the y-axis is showing the Stroop Light task, the reaction times in milliseconds. So the athletic group here is the one in red. So you can see before and after the study, their reaction time significantly decreased. And then for the second graph, again, the x-axis is before and after the study. And the y-axis is the META battery test, where there were 2 different stimuli, and the subject had to reject one of them and respond to the other one. And the graph is showing the false alarm count, again, which is when a response was given when it should have been retained. And you can also see in red how the number of false alarms significantly decreased. So basically, what does this all mean? So the results show how focused meditation and mental training can improve awareness in athletes. And the decrease in reaction time is really important in any sport. So if you're talking about a sport that has like a relatively stable environment, something like swim, like if you were to get up on the block, you have to be able to get off the block as fast as possible when the beeper goes off. Or if you're playing a contact sport when things are like constantly changing and stuff, you have to be able to make the best decision you can under certain circumstances. And the false alarm count is also really important because, again, if I were to go back to the swim example, if you get up on the block and they say take your mark and you flinch before the beeper goes off, you're disqualified. So you have to be able to control yourself. And again, and in a contact sport environment, you have to be able to decide what you're going to do with zero hesitation. So,
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the graphs for a second?
Yeah.
So it looks so they doesn't look like they did any sort of control athlete control.
No, they didn't. That's one of the things that they would have done.
Seems kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, same.
What do you think what do you think the results? Because I mean, it looks like their overall reaction. I'm assuming that the y-axis here is just it's reaction time, right? What is that like?
For the first one, yeah.
For the first one, okay. So their overall reaction time for athletes seems to be low, right? Like they react more quickly in
Right.
general. So it would I mean, can we really compare the inactive and athletic group to the?
That's a good question. Honestly, when I was doing all this reading of the presentation, I didn't really look at the inactive stuff because I didn't think it was that relevant either.
So it almost is like there's no control, right? If you're
Yeah,
not comparing
I would
it to
agree.
okay.
Yeah, it was one of the things that they would have fixed. They wrote it in the conclusion. And I
They
think
mentioned it in the conclusion.
Yeah, they mentioned it in the conclusion. So I think like it might have decreased a little bit just because athletes, they do a lot of not like mental training, but they're always in their head when they're doing sports and stuff, you know. So I think it probably would have decreased a little bit, but probably just not to the same amount.
Right. Okay.
So basically, this study just shows that constant mental practice did help in athletes, and the neurofeedback device was effective in giving real-time feedback to the athletes. And for things to fix, they know that the larger sample sizes of participants are needed to strengthen the observations of the study. Again, as you just mentioned, active control group would have been really helpful to be able to see the difference between the two. And also, they think that different kinds of sports would benefit from different kinds of meditation. So if you do a sport where the environment is relatively stable and your actions are predetermined, something like golf or something like swim, they think that it would be better for you to focus your attention on a certain object or a certain sound like in that environment. And if your sport takes place in an action environment where you have to learn how to adapt, they think that it would be better for you to focus your attention on your breathing or like what you're physically feeling. Questions? Okay, thank you.